is
Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy.
uh,
I had to not speak for a moment so that it would remain on screen.
Yeah, this is very important. I told everybody
critically important that I carry on Sam DeLev's legacy here on our channel.
I told everybody that they should clear their captions, which of course led them to saying a bunch of stuff. And yeah, so anyway, hi everybody.
There's a poll.
There
already.
sure is a poll. Hi everybody, welcome to tonight's episode of Ramblemancy. We're joined tonight by one Colin Kelly. Colin, hello.
Hi, hello.
You all may know Colin from In Too Deep, but more likely you know Colin from that one time he counterspelled healing. So
I do that.
yeah. Anyway, welcome everybody. Colin, it's good to have you here.
I enjoy being here. So
yeah. Okay, hold on a second. The captions are doing some weird stuff. Give me 1 second while I attempt to fix this. And
weird stuff.
Oh, that's not what I needed to do. I got this. We are professionals here at Rule of Lore. We know exactly what we're doing at all times. Okay, I can't fix them, apparently. It's just going to be like that, I guess. So, anyway, hopefully it unfucks itself at some point tonight.
Here's hoping.
Welcome, everyone. I saw Amethyst Cat Lady, hello. I saw Geek Outs, hi. Hermes, hello. Thank you so much for the bits. And thank you to everyone. Edgefit, hi. Welcome.
hey.
Yeah, and everyone else who is here silently lurking in the background. We appreciate you. So
We love our lurkers.
we do love our lurkers. I don't have too many announcements today other than if you have not already, you should fill out the Patreon form. It is here linked in the chat, but it is also in the Discord, linked in the pinned in the suggestion box channel. So you should go and look at that and do it. Fill it out. It's very important to us. But yeah, so if you haven't done that already,
us make cool shit that you
help us help you. Help us help you. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna make that
exactly. Help us
Precisely, yeah.
help you with content.
I'm not gonna make that reference. Anyway. Yeah, it's gonna be fill out the survey. Whether you are a patron or not, there are things to be filled out in there.
Your input is equally valuable whether or not you are currently subscribed to our Patreon. Lets us know what kind of things that people might want if they are not currently subscribed, or what our patrons are liking and not liking.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of the big important announcement really right now, as well as there will be announcements further, like the announcements, everything that we've talked about that was coming to Patreon will be, we will be posting the full list of it all on Patreon soon. That's all I got for you.
We will draft that up this weekend and give y'all a detailed sort of rundown.
The latest episode of Infinite Horizon went up on YouTube today, and the first episode of In Too Deep Season 2 will be up on YouTube tomorrow, Freeman?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. So you can check those out there. The Infinite Horizon podcast, of course, will be on schedule, I say tentatively, for Sunday, as usual. As has always been the case, it has always been on time, always. I don't know what you're talking about, or why you would even ask me that question. Why are we still talking about this? That's all I got. I think that's cool. I'm really glad that was clipped. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Anyway, that's what I got for you. That's what I got. So, on this, the day of our ramble, I would like to open actually not by throwing John under the bus. Yeah, no, I'm not going to be throwing John under the bus. I might be doing something else, or at least allowing for something else to happen, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. Anyway,
I'm terrified.
No, it's totally fine. So here's the thing. It is John's birthday.
It's come to my attention.
Oh my god!
Someone's birthday today? This is brand new
Birthday, John.
information. But it's just so everybody knows, it's John's birthday today.
How come I don't have a hat right now?
Yeah.
Do you have a headband? Do you want your hat? I can go get it.
Yeah, I would love a hat.
I will go get your hat.
Okay,
I'll be right
awesome.
back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
was
Thank you,
amazing.
Amethyst Cat Lady. Thank you, Crystal, for throwing John under the bus for me.
I somehow had forgotten that was a thing that you could have organized. This explains so much. When I was helping Crystal carry things in earlier when she drove up here, and she was like, "Nope, you can't see that." And I was like, "Oh, it must be. It was this.
Mm-hmm.
It was this."
Yeah.
All right, yes, thank you. All right, excellent. Now we have.
The ensemble.
Oh, heck yes.
This will be cathedral.
Yes, perhaps. Okay. all
There
right,
were
all
there
right.
were lots
There's
of there were lots of conspiracies that were had, but this was sort of ended up being the final draft.
Balance ensemble.
Well, I have to. I loved it.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
See you in chat.
See you, chat. Amazing. Amazing. Wow.
There were lots of versions of this plan that got bandied about. But
Good.
yeah.
This is incredible. I will now have to tilt my camera up in order for everyone to see the entire ensemble. This will remain on my head for the rest of the episode.
Yeah. So anyway, happy birthday, John.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. This has been such a wild birthday for me, because like I have like most of the last 2 years have been, of course, a global panini. And so like not a lot of birthday celebrating going on, but like today has been an absolute roller coaster, and all of y'all's birthday wishes throughout the course of the day repeatedly, and all of the birthday amblushing has absolutely made my day. So a very heartfelt thank you from me to all of you. If I haven't replied to your birthday wishes, I promise I will. There's been so many today. Thank you, Matt, for the
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for preserving this for all eternity.
Yeah. Incredible.
This is perfect.
All right. So, now that we have successfully done that, John, what do you got for us?
I knew it. I voted for no, but yes in the poll. I voted for no, but yes in the poll.
Honestly, I did too.
Tonight we're talking about lore. So,
yeah. So this evening, I think kind of when we were talking about this topic, I'm going to ramble the way that I always do and hope that it gets me to a question, or at least to something that will prompt conversation. But I remember when we kind of discussed this topic, one of the things we were talking about was just like, delivery of lore, and what works, what doesn't, like where does lore and delivering it kind of like factor into stories. Sorry, I just have to make sure everything is and so I guess there's the question, like what role does lore play in a story? I suppose is a question we could begin with.
Freeman, do not even voice the thought that I saw
I don't-
just pass
what?
across your face.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
I see you.
Yes, indeed.
I see you over there.
Okay, yes. I'll stand. I'll be quiet.
Lore can take a lot of places, particularly foreshadowing. I think it can definitely be used for that a lot, especially if it's like you're, let's say you're unearthing an ancient evil in your campaign. You can foreshadow that by, you've learned about the story. An example from our personal game is, there's this wizard way long ago who's still alive for us called Arcturus Rex. And he was essentially a serial killer, but a really powerful wizard. So killed a lot of people, and like a bunch of knights had to go and hunt him down. A lot died, but they managed to lock him away. And we heard a couple of times about Arcturus Rex, and the entire time we're like, he's going to be a villain. He's going to be a villain. We know he's going to be a villain because we keep hearing about him. So, and we wouldn't hear about him unless he wasn't going to be a thing. And turns out, okay, so here, okay, so two of our characters have amnesia. That's a thing. But two party members have amnesia. One of them died and woke up without revived, didn't have memories beforehand. But beforehand, their father was one of the knights who went to hunt down Arcturus Rex. When Arcturus Rex died, managed to transfer his soul into this character's father and take over his body. I now discover with my character's backstory, there's like a whole thing going on. It's like a Feywild themed campaign, and so there's like a lot of like Fey bullshit. There's like a creature it's split into 3 parts: its mind, its body, and its soul. And it's like a super powerful Fey, and they split it apart because it would just probably destroy the world if it was together as one. And then we find out it's like, oh, Arcturus Rex has the soul piece, basically. That explains so much. We're like, because the entire time I'm like, how did Arcturus Rex do that? Okay, it's just a thing. We'll probably figure it out eventually. And it's like, oh shit, okay. It's having lore inner character, like especially into player backstories, is such a huge deal in campaigns.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Using lore to like foreshadow stuff in the campaign is really, I think it's good. That is a good use of it. I always think when I think about lore, I now cannot help but think about Matt Colville. He like when he talks about it, there's like several occasions where he talks about like the applications of lore and how if you are bringing lore into your game, I don't know if I entirely completely agree with this, but I think I agree with the spirit of it, which is that if you bring it in, it should serve this like the game that you're playing in some way. Like nobody wants to just like sit and have lore regurgitated at them for like 15 minutes, right? Like nobody wants that. But like but then he takes it from the other direction too, which is like if you want them to care about your lore, give them a reason to care about it, which like I think feeds into your thing about like foreshadowing, right? Like it's a little bit the opposite of that, the opposite approach. Like you're using the lore to feed them towards like something that is coming. But I think the opposite can be true, which is kind of what Matt Colville says, which is that you can, if you're like me and you make lore for fun, or because you literally cannot stop yourself because you are a lore gremlin, then like, and you want your players to think it's as cool as you do, then you gotta come up with a good reason for them to care about it, not just like tell them for no reason. And I think that's like, that's the thing that always sticks in my brain now whenever I think about lore. I don't think I had anything further to say about that. I think that was just me just rattling off from that.
As a DM, it can definitely help as well when you have a player that's either really interested in that lore or has a character that actively wants to figure out that lore. For example, that same campaign, I'm playing a lore bard, but that's besides the point. But the 2 expertises I took were history and investigation. So I'm like, I can figure out all of the shit we need to know about like the background and whatnot, and then we maybe piece things together from there.
Yeah, I think I saw Geek Outs make a really good point. That unless it's Horizon Zero Dawn, then you crave the regurgitation of lore. Like, I am a lore gremlin, but that game made everyone a lore gremlin because it's a mystery and you want to know what the fuck. Yes. Okay, so I actually saw... Did I share that video in the server? There's a video that I saw that talks about specifically that, and it's... I don't know if I shared that or not, but I might... I'll see if I can find it later. Somebody, if I don't do it later, somebody poke me and remind me to share the video about storytelling.
I don't think I watched it when you was it about Horizon Zero Dawn?
It was about, on like the cover of it, like it was talking first, I think it's the same video. It was talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and like the visual storytelling of Cyberpunk 2077.
Right. Okay.
And then I think it goes into Horizon Zero Dawn. I think. I might be thinking of 2 separate videos by the same person, but I think it's the same video. I did. Okay, Geek Out says I did share that. Good. it's in there. But also, hi Nico, thank you so much for the sub. Oh my
On this
gosh.
fine, perfectly normal, I'm gonna shade it so that my cameras don't like, but on this fine, perfectly normal Friday upon which we find ourselves, you have subbed for a number of months equal to today's date.
Oh,
Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Damn, Nico.
Damn. Woo.
Yeah. Anyway, what was it?
Hmm?
I forgot what I was going to say next.
that also brings up a good point of like when it comes to lore, you just as a DM, you generally don't want to, unless there's a reasoning too, you don't want to just give it all to them at once. You kind of want to give it like feed them on. So where there's always that one thing of like, what the fuck's up with that? What's going on there? And then they might push more and figure out more. And they get more and more with each check, etc.
That's the one thing that I'm very specifically bad at doing. I'm bad at like trickling out.
You
like,
want to tell them.
I just want them to know. I want them to
Yeah.
know things.
I know. I'm this same way. I'm so bad. I just so badly want to be like, and let me just unfurl the lore documents.
I'm really bad with that just in general when it comes to DMing. So way back when I DM'd my Wildmount game that ended a few months ago, when it came to fast travel, when it comes to fast travel in general for D&D specifically, I haven't needed to do a lot of fast travel in other games, or just like when it comes to traveling across long distances. I hate rolling random encounters. I don't like doing it. I want to get to the story thing, so I generally just hand wave it. We skip over it, but some people like that, and it makes it feel like you've gotten something when you get there.
So I just started a Chult campaign that ignores the storyline sort of Tomb of Annihilation. But what I
Most part, yeah.
for the most part,
Yeah.
what I have found is that survival, like that sort of like survival gameplay, so I have two related thoughts. One of them is that survival gameplay works best when the survival is the gameplay, when that is the point of the game. Like even if it's just sort of like going to a destination, right? Like even so, it's got to be structured in a way where it's like for example, in Tomb of Annihilation, the module, you're trying to find the lost city of Omu, right?
Yeah.
And there's a story reason for you to get there, but you don't know where the city is, which it's theoretically it's implied by it being called the Lost City and not the There It Is City of Omu.
Not just Omu. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun fact, that is actually like a preface to all other cities that
true.
are not lost. We've kind of dropped it in contemporary usages.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like, and that I think is interesting because if the survival like travel element is the specific requirement to reach, if you make that a requirement to reach the next thing and not just a barrier in between you and it, right? Like make that part of it, then I think it can be fun. And then my second thought was related to your thing about random encounters. This really doesn't have anything to do with lore, but I brain did a thing. The single brain cell is firing today. Dale Kingsmill, Monarch's Factory, had a video a while back. I think it was like the year before last, where she had a video where she talks about travel versus exploration. And she had an interesting point in there that I had literally never thought about until she said it, which was that random encounters don't feel right in travel because they belong in exploration, not in travel. Like, and I think that was for me. I was like, oh fuck, like, that was something that it makes perfect sense too, right? Like random encounters could be a thing in travel, right? Like you expect at some point, like if the roads are dangerous or whatever, or country is dangerous, that's going to happen.
Those are better for planned encounters than random.
Yeah, exactly. So you do like, and that is, I think, largely the conclusion that she came to in that video is that travel, you have planned encounters, and then exploration, you have random encounters. Because let's face it, random encounters just slow shit down. They are a distraction at best. And that's not always going to be the case, but like, for the most part, that is how they play out. Anyway, this had nothing to do with lore. I just wanted to go off on that.
I got around it by I just gave my players an item to teleport. So,
I suppose that's one way to do it.
And I put like a bit of and it basically put like it was powered by celestial blood, and one of the warlocks, celestial patron, gave them 10 uses basically. So they had limited uses, so they couldn't just willy-nilly use it. And it's all the limitations of the teleport spell, but it just very much we decided that when we looked at them, like, okay, the next thing we up in the graying wildlands for a while, that was the far north basically of the continent, except for Islecross, but we don't count that. And then it's like, okay, the next place they need to go is the Menagerie Coast. And then I measured, I'm like, it will take them 50 days to get there, I think. I'm just going to give them something to teleport. That's basically what I consulted them. I'm like, y'all don't want to do 50 days of random encounters, right? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, that's what I figured.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and so the thing about here's how I'm gonna bridge my detour. I'm gonna justify my detour by bringing it back around. You ready for this? Here we go. I'm gonna put my English major to work. All right. So, delivery of lore, right, in an exploration game is very fun and interesting, as I am discovering, because that is essentially what Chult is, right? That whole continent is the whole campaign setting is made as an exploration game. That's the point of it. So it's very cool the way that they have the lore sort of sprinkled throughout the land, where you can find pieces of it, and over time, finding enough of it, you can start to put together pieces of what happened to Chult. And I think that's very cool. And having those moments, it's what essentially I think is the analog in tabletop RPGs to visual storytelling, right? Where you have these little indicators of things that happened and the way they played out, and then it's left up to the players to decide how they interpret those things that you're telling them, right? And I think that's very, very cool. That is a fun thing about exploration versus just any other means of delivering lore, right? I think that's, I don't know.
There's a very good point that's made in chat. Lore is best delivered by showing, not telling. I think of a great example of that. So in that same campaign, we were traveling from it was Hoggard's Crook to something in north of that. And there was a whole thing, but we decided to cut across the wilderness because it was faster, and there was something going on at the town we were going to. Apparently, we got hints about that. So okay, we should hurry because they might be in danger. The town might be in danger, as the hints we had gotten. But along the way, I assume my DM, what he did was he made custom random encounters that could actually fit the world, not just you fight 2 bugbears. It was just things you find, and we find the corpse of what was it? It was a Zarizian rider, basically, a Zarizian royal cavalry, essentially. Xeris is the far north of the continent. We're down south right now. We're and we find the crest and everything. We're what the hell is this guy doing here? We never found out. We were just okay, this guy, there's a body here, and he's from Xeris, and we're but it was just so cool. We're what the hell is going on with that? And maybe it'll come back and do things. But
that stuff is also cool, right? That's another thing. Another fun, cool way to deliver lore is not to deliver it, right? To hint at it, and then it never comes up again because you can't figure it out, and there's no obvious immediate way forward. So you're just huh? And then that just sort of perplexes and consternates the players for however long, it just stays in there. That shit is memorable because our brains like patterns, and they like resolution, and when something doesn't resolve, it just stays in there. Yeah. That shit's compelling.
An example of that was our most recent villain arc, which involved the Knights of Enos Karnon, where they're an ancient blood hunter order living in the woods that people had forgotten about because they wanted to stay hidden. Because kind of last time they got into conflict with the Eerie Guard, which is kind of they aren't inquisitors, they're kind of an inquisitorial force, but they're not inquisitors. But basically, they got kind of run out of things and pretty fucked up by the Eerie Guard, so they're trying to stay out of it. But we find them in the woods, basically, And there's basically the introduction was like they're about to execute someone. We're like, and one player who's like an active pacifist is like, and then that led to combat and us getting severely fucked up. And one NPC specifically allowing us to live essentially and letting us take the prisoner. And we were like, okay, what's up with that? And we're like, okay, I guess that's pretty chill. So we come to discover more about that place, and that what we're being told is that there is some sort of monster in the woods that needs to be fed, like is being fed blood and whatnot by them to keep it at bay. And so we start doing research in that. We're like, this, and like certain things aren't fitting. And we're like, okay, it could be this, but not all of that fits. Why? And so we go there and we find out the kind of one of the big bads who is referred to as Mr. Freak in game, who like grows feathers, and if you touch the feather you get a nightmare, and it's awful. It's a thing, it's really bad. But like he's got a hand, figure out he's got a hand in that, what's going on there. Like, okay, this is bad because we know what happened last time he had a hand in things. And basically, so we go there, and Theodore, the kind of like contact, like liaison we have, is basically like, okay, Zaleria, the like one of the other co-leader with himself, is like basically in cahoots with Mr. Freak, or like feeds us that information and is like, something's up with her, and he keeps trying to prod us to kill her. And we're like, okay. And then we keep pushing further and further. Eventually, we like kind of like defeat Zaleria in combat. She gets locked away because Theodore's like, she's dangerous, blah, 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 blah. Then my character is like having a mental breakdown because there's certain things that are happening that aren't lining up. Like he remembers things differently from the party. Like there was a moment where he got attacked by Zaleria, but the other party member, like who was in fairy form in his bag, was like, nothing happened. And he's like, what the fuck is happening? And then an NPC comes along, casts Greater Restoration on him. Turns out Theodore had been casting Modify Memory on me repeatedly.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're like, okay, he's the bad guy.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And then suddenly all of the lore, like the lore even fed, makes sense. Like he was lying about this. He was lying about that. There is no monster. He's creating a monster, which we
Wow.
it was.
That's really fucking
masterful.
cool.
Masterful.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
God, like, and there's, I ran a game recently, like a Feywild game. We're finished running a Feywild kind of short shot recently, and I was thinking too about just like small ways that you can deliver lore like that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like checks. It can just be describing other parts of the world just existing or interacting, in the way that the characters had arrived just as there was a festival like occurring in a town heavily inspired by like the Celtic holiday Imbolc. And so it's I just, as the players entered the town, like by way of description, I offered like some of the same traditions that you would see, like children sitting and weaving little straw symbols, and others like walking around from door to door as the sun was setting with candles and bearing the flame inside and lighting the hearth, like describing just like some of those simple kind of like things, like even just like a brief description of stuff like that can fill out the world and make it feel like very rich and full without a single die rolled.
On Telegram rolling die Hermes, what I would recommend if you're going to do that is do what my DM did. If he knew that Modify Memory was probably going to be cast this session, beginning of the session, he has all of us roll 2d20s. We don't know what for. We just roll 2d20s. We don't know if it's advantage, disadvantage. We just roll 2d20s, and then he can look at our sheets and then calculate the number later. That's what was happening for all of my wisdom saves for Modify Memory. I rolled them at the beginning of the session. I just didn't know what I was rolling. And so when it happens, I'm just like, okay, things are happening. It was very, very well. I was like, damn, why haven't I been doing that? That's really good.
That's wild.
Because you don't know who's rolling it. Like,
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
There's also a thing with my character where I always fail my wisdom saves. I'm proficient. I just always fail them. Like I think I've passed 2.
Oh
in
no.
the entire
God, oh, no.
campaign.
What was I gonna say? Oh, I wanted to address this thing because I think it's important. So I agree in general with what Nico said about lore best delivered by showing and not telling. I think that is true. However, there is an asterisk on that, and that is that sometimes like showing instead of telling actually just gets in the way of what you're trying to do. So sometimes you literally just can tell them what like something. And I think that it's like the real trick is knowing which time is which. um and like there's unfortunately not a good answer to that. I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule that you can follow there. I think it just sort of has to be on a case by case basis. Like you got to just sort of decide for yourself in that moment, like is it meaningfully is it like important for me to keep this like as something that isn't just explicitly stated, or does it need to be is it something that just needs to be like said? Because sometimes there are those instances, and I don't have a good rule for like why you would like employ one over the other, but I do know that there are those times. So like I think I agree with that. If you have to tell them the lore for something, chances are it's not lore but necessary plot information. I think I can agree with that.
I think there can also definitely be a very common experience of you describe something and maybe you describe something a little too well and it sticks in the players' minds and then they're really stuck on that, but in reality that doesn't matter. An example is that same campaign, my character had this box which had 13 locks. Each had, all of them had the same 13 symbols on them, and basically the box would give him a vision, and it was a story lock. So basically each symbol meant something and corresponded to the events in the story, and you had to line them up in order. And now there was one symbol referred to as grain. It's all in a druidic. And there's a point in the story where my character, in the vision, where my character passes by things full of grain. I hadn't figured out the meaning for grain, but like as me and the group were solving it, we're like, I mean, grain's grain, right? Grain means grain. So it was like Mr. Incredible, grain is grain. And so we just ignored that one, started getting meaning for all the others. We're like, oh, I think we're putting it together, and then like we were getting it wrong, and then at a point my DM had to say, it's like, there is one thing that you all are very confident on that's incorrect, and we're like, oh, what? And so then we do a bit more research. We figure out the meaning of grain. It doesn't mean grain. It doesn't mean grain. Sickle means grain. It corresponds to the grain name. It means like harvest and whatnot.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think
when the players get too stuck, you eventually just kind of be like, I mean, I think Crit Roll, if you watch that, there's an example of the chair. It's just a chair. Like, it's a chair.
Sometimes a chair is just a chair, you know?
Yeah. It's like, it just depends. Move on.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think I think what I'm talking about as far as like some like telling versus showing, I think Nico is correct in that if you have to tell them the lore, chances are it's not lore but necessary plot information. And that's true. I think when it comes to tabletop RPGs, I think where my head was at was more in terms of like fiction and writing in general. Like the common wisdom, I think, is that like oh, show, don't tell. Yeah, but sometimes showing and not telling just gets in the way of what you're trying to actually do. But that's mostly true in writing. So I think that's kind of mainly where I was getting at. But that said, I also agree with what Matt said here, which is do not be afraid to hit pause and clarify as the GM. Like that's I've done that so many times because like I'm pretty sure you've probably even seen me do it on Infinite Horizon, where like the players are like running off with something and I'm just like, okay, I want to stop you for a second because I don't think you understood what I just told you. And it's very important.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be obvious to your characters, but you, the players, have misinterpreted something that I said that is going to be not interesting but frustrating, and that's the difference.
Conversely, don't be afraid as a player to ask for clarification.
Also, that
is last episode of In Too Deep, there was like a half drow, right? And I mentioned she had tattoos, and then the players were like, what kind of tattoos? Because Shahar's got a whole deal with like the tattoos and like that whole like assassin syndicate thing going on. And then I'm kind of like, not those tattoos, because otherwise had they seemed like half drow with tattoos and they just assumed that they would just been all on edge. I'm like, I would have been like, why are you still on edge?
Yes, exactly. That's also
like,
very
no,
important.
they've just got some rad tattoos. Like,
yeah, they've just got tattoos. That's it.
They got some mean ink. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times like it seems really obvious. I really want to emphasize the thing that Matt said about don't be afraid to hit pause and clarify. I really want to emphasize that because I feel like I know this because I have done this back when I was like first like really getting into D&D specifically a few years ago. So, like sometimes it's okay for you to say something and then allow the players to misinterpret it, and that's okay. But sometimes you gotta just tell them something because like it's a situation where like will them misinterpreting it and getting the information wrong be dramatic and interesting, or will it be frustrating?
That's
And
yep. I've had many moments where,
Mm.
as a GM, I've done something, and then the players have been like, "Oh, well," and then I can feel the "Oh, that's what it was," like the confusion and to a sense frustration in their voice, and then you feel
and then
shit as DM.
right, and then and this is the important thing, because the difference between the outcomes is like you just said, the difference between those outcomes is, in one, you're upset at the DM for like keeping that from you. It's like, wow, that felt really cheap, right? In the other, you're mad at yourselves for not like thinking it through and be like, oh shit, we totally like and that I think is a better outcome, because then it's not a like antagonistic like, yeah, you kept in important information from us that we felt we should have had, but rather a like, oh man, we could have had that, we had everything we needed but we didn't quite put the pieces together correctly. That's a
I
very
mean,
different experience.
that's what happened with the modify memory thing of like, we
Yeah.
had all the information, we could have figured out what he was doing because we
Exactly.
knew he did charming magic, because he cast mass suggestion, he'd cast charm person on people. We knew he did that kind of magic, and we knew he was a decently high leveled spellcaster. And so we could have figured out that he'd been modify memorying us. We just didn't put the pieces together like that. We knew he was sus. Like the entire time we're like, he seems nice, but he feels sus. We don't know why. And then we're like, oh shit, we could have known that the entire time. Oh man.
Right? Yeah. Like in our home game, I had a similar situation where like I there was a mysterious villain. I had some like certain behaviors led the paladin in the group to misinterpret those things, and led him to believe that the mysterious villain was actually his mentor. And when I realized, I did not intend for him to make that connection, but when I realized that that's what he had done, I just let him believe it. And then I let him believe that, and then I let things played out, and then I continued to seed hints that it was someone else entirely. And then by the time it was revealed who it actually was, everybody was like, God damn it, we could have known, we should have known, we should have. They weren't mad at me for misleading them. They were mad at themselves, because they suddenly, all the pieces of information that they had like clicked into place. They're like, shit. And that's, yeah.
I think that's one big thing if you're running a political intrigue game, especially, that you need to be careful about, of providing information to players to where they could, in theory, figure it out. But if you don't want them to figure out, provide it in such a way that it would be hard for them to put the pieces together, but they could have put the pieces together in theory. And I mean, it's always good to leave that option of them figuring out and open as well.
Hold on.
Because if they could never figure out, then if you could never figure out as a player, it feels bad, because then you feel like your actions didn't matter. Like no matter what you did, it's going to be here.
Right. Like Koala says, I love the kind of show not tell that acts as foreshadowing. Like after you're told lore later by a piece of fiction, and you go back and the things these characters or the DM were saying were vague when you heard them first, but now are so clearly referencing this prior knowledge they had and this dramatic upper hand they had on the protagonists as players. Shit makes me psyched. Yeah, no, exactly. That kind of stuff is so cool. Like I love that kind of thing. And as a GM, I find it very gratifying when I pull something like that off, and then after the reveal, then my players continually are realizing things afterwards. They're like, "Oh shit, that's what this was! Oh my god!" And then they'll be like, yeah, like when they found out that this mysterious villain, when he introduced himself, he gave a name that they did not realize was an anagram of the name of the player character whose future version it was, right? It was an evil future version of one of the player characters. And I just his name, the name that he gave them was an anagram, and they were so mad when, although that one they were mad at me a little bit, but
No,
But there's a
fucking
healthy,
love-
there can be a healthy level
That's-
of
yes, that-
anger with your DM.
yes, I think, and
I
that one
guess so.
was. Sorry, what
It
were you
was
saying, Freeman?
definitely,
Like
yeah.
poking
I was just,
fun
I loved
anger
that moment.
and
Yeah.
anger.
Yeah,
It was just an amazing moment. I remember it fondly. Just like that moment dawning on me, just like, oh, of course. And ever since then, I've been trying to figure out ways to replicate that with like
It's-
player characters.
well, we kind of a little bit did it last night.
That
We
one
started-
was
you can tell it if you want.
that one. I was just gonna say was that one sort of just landed in my lap because you were rolling random names on the table.
That's true.
You came up with the name Malark,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, since this character is kind of pulling their leg, and at the end is going to,
Yeah.
is basically a
So-
hook.
So like the context here is basically that like
True.
that we were making characters for this Chult game, and Freeman was not there for our like informal session 0. So Freeman was the only person that nobody knew what character he was making. So I saw this as an opportunity, and I was like, "Hey Freeman, what if you made 2 characters, and one of them was a fake character whose sole purpose is to be killed off right away?"
100%.
Thereby, like, not for to be clear, this was not for 0 reason. The reason for it was to like give the players a personal stake in a conflict in world, so that they aren't just like sort of free floating agents. They actually have ties to something. But anyway, so Freeman was rolling. We were rolling names randomly on a chart for this for the fake character, and it rolled Malark. And we're like, okay, we can't call him that. It's like it's too close to malarkey. Like they're gonna figure that shit out. And then we're like, but what if we did it anyway?
Yep.
I have a funny story about names, but one thing I think that can also be important is like allowing your players to figure it out, but not necessarily ever not confirming it until the time is right. I think so. An example in Into Deep, spoilers for Into Deep season 1 if you haven't seen it. But it's basically the players went to confront Manchun, and it was just him. Then they promptly killed him, and like some of them were like, that was too easy. And the way I hinted at that, obviously looking later down, they figure out later on when actual Manchun shows up, that was a simulacrum that they killed. But they were fighting in the snow, and I'm like, you see Manchun literally melt. And they're like, oh shit. And they go over, they're like, what's left of the body? Just a cloak and a pile of snow is what I said. Because, I mean, simulacrums, when they die, just turn into snow and ice. And I think some of them figured it out, but they didn't know. And then, yeah, Manchun shows up and it's like, boom.
Yeah. That's
being able to, because it's good as the player to be like, I knew it all along. It's always fun as a player to do that.
What I think is interesting here is that this conversation has sort of gradually, and I think organically, shifted from being about lore and the delivery of it to being about information in TTRPGs, which I think is a very interesting topic too, right? There's because like information and how it is delivered and how much is delivered, and like being able to keep kind of turning the dials as a DM, turning the dials on information in a campaign is so important, I think. And like to varying degrees depending on what kind of game you're running, but like in general that will always be important. It's just a matter of knowing when to like sort of throttle the information down and when to like, you know, ramp it up. And I think that's a just fascinating part of the whole process of TTRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I have a funny story about names in this campaign. So that connection with like the character's father who got possessed. So for 2 NPCs, two of the players, I'm one of the players, but 2 of the players, the other players gave their backstories to the GM. Like a couple sessions in, the GM's reading through it again, and then realizes, wait a minute. They both named a character River Yeldrin in their backstory. The same name spelled the same way. And then he's like, what am I going to do with this? And he's like, I got it. And so basically the knight River Yeldrin took on the character's father's name after he perished in battle, essentially, as like an honor thing. And they were friends. It's like a whole thing. And I'm like, And we lost our shit when he told us that. We're like, how did you two make the NPCs with the same name? Unprompted. They did not talk to each other about it. It just happened.
I love that stuff.
That kind of stuff is amazing, especially as a GM when you're doing lore. It's like, oh, that's pretty fun. Yeah. Boom.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift as a GM.
Yeah, for sure. John, I'm sorry. I keep looking over you and I can't take you seriously. It's really hard.
No, I keep getting distracted by my own prodigious headwear.
There's layers.
Yeah,
There's at
just
least 4 layers.
Yeah.
yeah, like I have like, the base layer, which is like we start frankly at the glasses.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh,
And then
okay.
you work outward from there. Then we have the beanie.
Mhm.
And then like there's the headband and the headphones, but also positioned on top, just perched atop my headphones, is the little party hat.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's just
It's really this is it'll be a shame to take all of this off, because like it is a work of art.
iconic indeed.
Thank you, Amethyst Cat Lady, for blessing us all with this.
Amazing.
Iconic indeed.
Oh my god.
That's. Oh, go ahead. What you're saying, John?
I was just scrolling up in chat, so.
I like Nico's thing here. I think an interesting topic to discuss is the function of lore and campaigns, which we did bring up, but I don't think we actually got into it at all. I think, Colin, you mentioned foreshadowing, which was cool.
Mhm.
Like, I think that's true. But like, why and when to give lore to your players? Okay, yeah. I think that is I think we have at various points touched on that topic, but I think it's worth talking about for sure.
Yeah. I think the gist of it is that lore when delivered should drive your players toward an objective, right?
Or at the very least inform the objective.
Yeah, or should inform the objective that they are pursuing in some way, right? If you're going to deliver a piece of lore to me about like maybe like a battle or like a conflict or like a long dead like lord of some area, it could very easily be something that ties into like maybe this ruin that I'm going to visit is like their burial cairn or their like the castle where they were slain in some conflict. And so like that ties into like things that you can then reach for this little piece of knowledge. You have like, oh yeah, this person lived here or ruled from here. So now when we're encountering this trap or this puzzle or like this riddle that we have to solve, then we can go, okay, so what else do we know about this guy or this group of people that he belonged to? Like so.
Yeah. I also want to note that like informing or driving towards an objective, I think can also include just straight up curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it can include those things.
Like that example that Matt Colville gave in the towards TTRPG rewards video, or towards better rewards, in which he just wrote like the name of a magic item without explaining what it was as the reward. Like, I think this is a Diablo item actually, but like Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. What the fuck is that? It's the Blessed Blade of the Wind.
Dope.
Yeah, I want to go find out what that is. So that can just as easily like drive your players or pull your players towards something is that kind of delivery of lore as well.
Yeah. I also think
Sorry, no, I just Geekus just posted a vignette in chat and I was reacting to that.
Koala says, I also think like in mystery settings or with characters like detectives, I'm thinking your Rizga, Gex, and such, lore can be used to reward their RP in a way. Interesting. Like the more curious they act as a character and the more investigative they are, and also roll depending, I guess. You can reward them with when they ask the right questions. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a little bit what I was getting at. That's one when I was saying curiosity could be like that objective too, right? Like I think that's a little bit kind of what I was getting at. Because sometimes your players just want to know stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the first players I ever had in any game was a player who would ask me questions apropos of nothing, would ask me questions about the world just because he wanted to see what I would come up with. Because back then I would just I didn't do like, I mean, I did world building, but I sort of, like he would ask me questions just to see what I would come up with on the fly. And for him, that was fun. It was fun to see what I would come up with. And like he genuinely wanted to know the answers, but he also just wanted to, like, for him it was just interesting. He didn't care what the answer was. He just wanted me to tell him something, to come up with something. And I think that's very cool. Yeah, rewarding curiosity I think is always a good thing. But yeah,
those rewards could definitely come in various different ways too. It could be answer to your question and more things to seek out. It could be a plot line.
Could be
it could just be a literal. It could just be a funny moment. For example, we were talking with an archfey who like ruled a city named Veranestra, which is like really big tree dryad, basically. And then she mentions like, oh, the courts have been split. Like the two queens of the courts of the Feywild are missing. Like Titania and the other one, which I don't remember the name of, and then it's like Titania was married to Oberon. I'm like, oh, like what's the deal with Oberon? And then her literal response was, he's a whiny bitch. And we're like, yes, we want to meet Oberon now. Like to give you an idea, there's a section that used to be a city that's now like partially underwater because he's been so mopey and sad that it's like raining constantly there. And it's affecting the weather. We're like, oh my god.
That is so
I love that.
Oberon.
It's amazing.
Very much so. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Nico says if you've been having a whole bunch of tense moments, combat, intrigue, etc., have a session that just lets them discover the world they inhabit.
Yep.
It can be a welcome break. Yeah, absolutely. I think that stuff is so cool and interesting. Like there are certain sessions that I've had where it's just been like sessions of just players being curious about a new setting and like just being in that setting, and that's fun. Like it can be fun. Like obviously you don't want to do that all the time because that kind of gets tedious after a while, or it turns into a lot of work for the DM because they have to constantly be like coming up with stuff. But yeah, like I think that's an excellent idea, Nico. Like that's a great way of doing that. Also, hi Remy. Welcome.
Remy.
Follow Remy on Twitter.
Do it.
Hold on.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really should add a counter to that so it counts how many times it's been used.
that's true. It won't count all the times that Drac just spams Remy's Twitter into chat, but
That's true. That's true.
But
It's one of my favorite Dracisms around here. Is the dropping Remy's name, like Remy's Twitter 3 times in chat.
Yes. Another topic that could be talked about is running campaigns in settings that already have pre-written lore. So like, for example, running stuff in Forgotten Realms as compared to your own homebrew setting. Like, there's a very different dynamic there.
Yeah.
What I tend to do is if I'm running it in a pre-established places, like I try to follow it for the most part. But like, I am very much not afraid to be like, fuck that, I don't like that, or we're doing this. It's the definition of like, this is neat, but I like this, like that.
See, it's about the letter of the lore or the spirit of the lore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Like I think I tend, I mean, I'm only for the first time, that's not entirely true, but at least as far as D&D goes, I am for the first time running in a pre-written setting, and my my current approach has been, what's here, what do I like, what do I not like? Okay, I'll actually give you a perfect example of this. If you note, if any of you have ever read the like Tomb of Annihilation and like read about like the political powers, it talks a lot about like the Lord's Alliance and like their interests in Chult, and it talks about what the Gentarum are doing. It talks about the Harpers, and it talks about the Order of the Gauntlet and all these things, right? You know what it doesn't talk about? The merchant princes. It does not talk about what they want.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about what they want.
Yeah.
It just tells you that they're there and what they do. It does not tell you what they want. So like me reading this, I was just like, nope, I don't think so. I don't like that. I'm going to inject my own story into this. And basically I'm not going to say too much about what I did because Freeman is a player in that game. But not that this information is like hard to come by in the setting. That's fine. But the point is that like I decided to like take what the merchant what essentially the lack of information about the merchant princes and then turn that into something in and of itself. And I think what I have arrived at, and John, because I've talked to you about it, I think you can back me up on this. What I arrived at is something that creates a much more dynamic and interesting political landscape for the campaign. Like whether or not they choose to engage with that is a different story, but at the very least an interesting political backdrop. And that's a good example for me of like what you were just talking about, Colin, which is like when you're in a pre-written setting and you're just like, all right, I see what is written, or in my case what is not written, and I am going to alter it to be sort of like the spirit of what should be here, rather than play it to the letter of what was written here.
Yeah, like, instead of your players going there and finding like, oh wow, there really was nothing after all. It's like, okay, so there was something here if we wanted to dig deeper, but like, on the surface it appeared as though it was just a thing that was happening.
Yeah.
I also very much agree, Remy. Ooh, the Underdark. Ooh boy. I don't know if people have Forgotten Realms. All of the previous D&D settings I tend to just not like playing in because they feel old and antiquated to me in many ways. And it's just like, I like new stuff, like the newer things that are just more with the times, I guess, and like hip lingo or whatever.
Yeah. On the other hand, I agree with that. On the other hand, the opportunity to take, like for me, I love Dragonlance. I also recognize Dragonlance has a lot of problems, but like for me, the opportunity to take Dragonlance, something that I loved from when I was a kid, and make it my own, do it my way. I think, and it's a little bit what I'm doing with Chult too, right? Like I didn't like, that's on a sort of a different scale because it's not about the lore, it's about like the campaign and how it's structured. I didn't really like it, and so the opportunity to take it and make it my own is gratifying to me. But I also do understand, like sometimes it's just like you don't want to like engage with some of that stuff, and I understand that. But yeah, I don't think I actually had a point to make there.
No, yeah, for sure. It's choosing when it comes to pre-written settings, it's definitely good to pick and choose things you do include, not just be like, I am writing it as written, because then you can run into uncomfortable or problematic things, or just things that are just not interesting or fun.
Yeah.
And alternatively, if you have a player who just happens to know all of the Forgotten Realms lore, it can get a bit annoying as a DM when there's like, well, this, and this. And I'm like,
you mean like how nobody knows whether Chult is an island or a peninsula?
Yes.
Because it has at various points in times been either one.
Oh, no.
It's like, oh, it's actually like world events that did that. No, you're talking about retconning. You're talking about retconning and lack of communication between sources that you are covering with.
It is at this point that I would like to advise anyone who is working on any kind of writing project or tabletop RPG project to hire an editor. This is their job. Not just because I am one and that gets me work, but also please hire an
alternatively, not alternatively to that, but alternatively with like Chult, for instance, in the Forgotten Realms. In the case of conflicting information, you could just do what TV writers do, which is just say alternate universe.
Oh God,
I'm just kidding.
we did that.
No shade to
Comics do
TV
it.
writers. That's
Campaign
hard.
once,
That
and
shit's
man,
hard.
did it get messy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what comics writers do all the time. They're like, it's okay. This is just a parallel universe where things are slightly different.
Well,
A
and like sometimes you want to explore something without having to like rewrite entire like chunks of things, and like that's cool. I can understand that. For that, say like just hand waving and say that's an alternate universe, because I don't want to
What
think
if-
about this any more than that.
What if they all had really evil
When-
mustaches? Like just like nothing else was different about them, but all of them had decided to grow out these cartoonishly evil looking like facial hair.
Yes.
A little bit off topic, but kind of still related to lore. Doing things that are prequels is always an interesting thing to do, because you kind of know if it's something big and impactful for the world, you know how it's gonna end.
Thank you.
The Rogue One problem.
Exactly. You know how it's
the
gonna
Star
end.
Wars
You know-
prequel trilogy problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why?
you know how it's
Yeah.
gonna end.
Why would they
Exactly.
focus so much energy on foreshadowing Anakin turning to the dark side? We already fucking know that
he's
shit.
gonna turn to the dark side.
Just don't do that. Make us wonder how this cool dude turned into the most evil person in the galaxy. Don't just like have him be a whiny teenager who is like angsty and shit all the time. You're like, gee, I wonder what's gonna happen. You know, like okay.
Yeah, no. Instead, show me the decline
Yes.
from like, force prodigy hero into he is Darth Vader now. Like
Yeah.
you don't
I'd
need to
say
foreshadow it. I know it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
this goes for your campaign worlds too, because you got to be careful with that. It's like, oh, you ran a campaign, it's like, oh, we're gonna this one, and it takes 100 years before the other campaign. It's like, okay, I mean, like you kind of know how it's gonna end. It gets a little different than that depending on if you're focusing the same region, etc. Yada yada yada. But like there's one particular way to do that, and that if there are unresolved things in your campaign, then and having it close together to where the events of the prequel thing could, in theory, affect the normal campaign. For example, there was one week where people couldn't make it, so our DM ran a thing, and there's these like a little one shot where we just made new characters. It's a different part of the continent, but there's this whole plot line going on where there's this hatch that leads to different places in the Feywild, and there's these keys you get to unlock the hatch, right? And basically it's like during that whole one shot we were finding the keys, and we find out at the end, we handed to the keys, the person we delivered the key to him basically makes an offhanded remark of like, oh, the Green Man will really enjoy this. And we know in our normal campaign, Green Man, bad guy, they're trying to get the keys for bad purposes. Our characters don't know that, and then like we turn that in, and the one shot ends, we're like, oh, what did we just do?
So like, yeah, and that's the thing, like, right? I think, okay, first of all, I want to address some good stuff in chat. First, Geekouts agree. Thank you, Dave Filoni. The Star Wars Clone Wars redeemed Anakin Skywalker. Thank you very much.
True.
Remy says, this is the shit I love and why I don't care if I learn spoilers most times, because it's about the journey, not the destination. Absolutely, which goes directly into what I was about to say, which is relevant to what you were just talking about, Colin, which is like, because you were just saying how you have to kind of be careful with like, like prequels and like, that kind of stuff, right? And because you've got to, and I think if I were to make a rule for prequels, is that prequels should not show you what, because we already know what. Prequels should explain how. Prequels should be about how, not about what. And I think that's very important, right? Like we already know that Anakin becomes Darth Vader. We don't want to be like constantly have something we already know teased for us, because we already know. What we care about is how. Right? Like prequels are best when used, like if there's an event that took place, that's like a major event that took place in your world, and you want to do sort of like a prequel, that like it's fine if like the players know that event is coming. Like if there's some sort of cataclysm or whatever, it's fine if they know that event is coming. The Dragonlance did this really well. Like it talks about in the Dragonlance Chronicles, there's this cataclysm that took place that like caught like in which many people believe the gods abandoned Kryn, right? And then there's this. It's kind of a prequel slash sequel. It's not really a prequel. It's a sequel trilogy, which is the Dragonlance Legends, which is about two of the characters, Caramon and Raceland, they're brothers, and they end up through a series of magical bullshit back in time in the days leading up to the Cataclysm. And so, like, we know the Cataclysm is coming, and we know the stories told about the Cataclysm, but we don't know how it happened, and that's what makes it super dramatic and compelling.
You can't make your story about people trying to prevent said thing because you know they are going to fail. So you know how it ends. You want to do how. It's like, okay, sure, they like it's like this cataclysm is gonna, but how did it come out? Not, oh, these people are gonna try to stop it. They might stop it. It's like, no, they're not going to. We know they're not going to.
You know,
unless you're gonna do some alternate universe shit.
What would be super dramatic, I think, is taking what you just said, Colin, and have like a different group of adventurers going off to stop the thing that you know is not going to go well, right? And then the party,
they're doomed.
They're doomed. The party's job is like something else, like that just happens to be in the days leading up to whatever that is happening, right? But there's like another adventuring group from the time that is going off to, like, I think we're talking about time travel now. I sort of got off track here, but but yeah, like the then have like another group of adventurers going off to stop the thing that you and your group know isn't gonna, they're not gonna succeed, and I think that's dramatic. Hermes, hard agree. The Twin series is my favorite. That was my favorite one. I loved Dragonlance.
And I definitely agree, Remy, that I also tend not to care about spoilers because sometimes spoilers make me more invested because I know something's gonna happen. I'm like, I want to see how they play that scene, and I want to see what like happened, like how they get to that point. It's cool. The exception being the Legends of Arceus spoiler I did for myself accidentally earlier today, and it was painful.
I think for me that's it too, is because like so much of my enjoyment of stories is how we get there and like how they arrive at this thing. So like I don't mind spoilers so much because if anything, they will oftentimes invest me more. They will make me want to watch more as opposed to turning me off, because like what I'm watching for is not really the surprise of something happening, because like you read enough books, you watch enough movies, you watch enough TV series, at a certain point you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I know it's, and like sometimes you're wrong, but you know what you are watching for is like the experience of seeing how it happens. So like
also I've said this before, but I think it's been a long time since I said it. Surprise is a tool in the DM's toolbox, and it is, in my opinion, the least of the tools in the DM's toolbox.
Use it sparingly.
Yes. Plot twists are great, but when you're doing a plot twist constantly, it's just it leads to a lot of bad things. Many things that actually are sort of like unforeseen consequences that I won't go into now because it would require like a whole spiel about like.
Game of Thrones can be referenced that, and that their brand kind of became plot twists almost. We saw how that ended up, but that was there are a lot of things wrong with season 8. That was kind of one of them. There were some other more notable things, like they should have had more episodes. But
I mean, when you've got an 800-page book, you can a lot easier kind of make this such that it doesn't feel like, oh wow, plot twists constantly, especially if you've read a single European history book. But because then you're kind of like, okay, yeah, having bounced around to every single one of the POV characters' viewpoints this book, I am not at all surprised when the Red Wedding happens, because I've just read the first 2/3 of this book, right? I am not really super surprised when, I'm sorry, these are Game of Thrones spoilers, but it's like it's been out for so long.
You probably had this spoiled elsewhere as well.
Like not to like hot take. I don't think you should care. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, spoilers are different when like something's just come out.
Yeah.
That's a different
Yeah,
thing.
I'm
But
not
like
gonna-
when
I'm
something
not
has
gonna-
been out for like at least a couple months, it's like
I mostly meant
you
care
could
about.
have seen it.
I mostly meant care about Game of Thrones. Period. But that's
Uh,
Fair.
That's fair. That's also fair.
Yeah.
I
I'm
wanted to
not
go
gonna-
back. I wanted to go back to something really quick because Colin, you were talking about the like the prequel, knowing how something happened and how like that's more important, right, than like foreshadowing that something happened. You can actually use this to your advantage, right? When players know that how something played out, you can use it to your advantage in the form of flashbacks, right? Improvised flashbacks, because then you can this and I think Freeman, I've done this with you before, where
Sounds very familiar.
where I basically just like toss you into a flashback and like something that I know happened in your backstory, and we both know because you made it part of your backstory. We both know what the result of that is.
Yeah, Mason did that a few
That's
times,
right.
I think.
Yes, and so we
Yeah,
both know what the
absolutely.
result is. So now we're showing the how, and so being able to improvise, you can actually use this to your advantage with flashbacks. So you can just take your player and say, okay, we're actually going to go back 8 years ago when you're in this place, and you describe like a place that is unmistakably in like the place that they were having this like seminal event in their backstory, and then just let it play out, like, and it's improvised, but then that essentially what you're doing is establishing the canon of how, because you and your player know what already, you know the outcome. And so that stuff is something you can use to your advantage, which I have done numerous times.
You can definitely also use like character pasts as almost like a plot hook or intrigue element in and of itself if that character doesn't necessarily know what happened to them. As I mentioned in the campaign, we have two players who don't remember who they were before a certain point. And so at that point, it becomes their character arc of figuring out who they were.
Right.
Because we want to know. It's like, okay, how did I get to this point, sort of thing. I know one player, I mean, he literally gave our DM like a paragraph. It's like, here's they woke up, they remember this much, they made like this friend, go buck wild, basically. And as a DM, you're like, okay.
Yeah, man.
Also, as a player, this is the thing for me as a DM. As a player, when you're writing your backstory, it's nice to have details. Do not make your backstory too detailed. Because you make your backstory too detailed, the DM has no room to work, and it actually leads to kind of more boring character arcs because you don't have the DM. You literally don't have a lot of room to work. So again, you kind of know where the character's going.
Don't resolve your backstory when you write your backstory.
Yes, correct. Do not resolve your backstory when you write your backstory.
It's why the bullet point backstory has more and more become my favorite method of backstory.
the Freeman approach to backstory.
I start with a bullet point.
Yeah, it's
the Freeman approach.
The Freeman approach to backstory is bullet points.
Yeah.
The most detailed part of my most recent character, like created characters backstory, is the part where I detailed like the where each of my where each of the siblings fell and what Fae like race they belonged to.
The rule I usually give players who are like doing backstory for the first time is or at least for the first time with me, the rule I usually give them is like, don't write anything in your backstory that your character would not know. Like if like some mysterious person sent an assassin to kill your parent or whatever, right? Don't If your character don't write who that mysterious person is. Just write the events that took place in your character's life. Don't write what they don't know. And I make exceptions for that sometimes when like players have like a single thing that they like that they like are sort of building their character around. That's fine as long as everything else around that, like, it's okay if the player has a little bit of meta knowledge about their own backstory. That's fine, but like write when you're writing the backstory, leave unknowns, leave blank spaces, and you can use your character's knowledge as a guide for what and where.
I'd say this includes NPCs. Whenever you're writing NPCs in your backstory, you can give them a general vibe, be like, okay, here's the relationship between these characters. You can keep it pretty simple, but it's more. I find it more fun to leave the NPC and the NPC's backstory, as well as their like more developed personality to the DM. So that way you get to experience something new. It's like, okay, I know how I feel about this character, how my character feels about this character, but I don't necessarily know them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a good example is my bard has a rival in the same bard college, and they fucking hated each other, but now they're pretty chill because they basically, it's more like they got off on the wrong foot. Like they kind of realized, okay, we got off on the wrong foot.
Mm-hmm.
You have your reasons for hating my mentor, and I understand that. And I understands that those are genuine reasons to be suspicious. But also they got off on the wrong foot. And now, I mean, the whole rivals to friends or rivals to lovers trope is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. You got to have that in there at some point. Nico, that's really fucking dope campaign idea. I love that. That's fucking sick. I paused the chat by accident.
I did actually do something kind of similar to that when characters were trying to like pull back, like we're trying to return an NPC to life whose soul had essentially been snatched out of the normal like way that it finds its way to the afterlife in D&D. And we're basically just like hopping through a series of her like scattered memories and reenacting pieces of them. It was very fun. I absolutely eat that kind of stuff up.
I remember you telling me about that. That's sick. I don't have any I could talk more about this, but if I start now, we will not stop. We don't have enough time in this Ramblemancy for us to start any of the things that are on my brain. So there is that.
There are many things on my brain right now, just above them.
You know, I hate that.
Jeez. I've never really until this moment thought about a hat as being just above my brain, but now all of my regalia has made me think such.
Yeah, that's what we got. I think that's it. I think that's the whole thing. That's the
whole ramble.
The whole ramble. Colin, thanks for coming out and hanging out with us and
of course,
talking about lore.
It was fun.
And sorry, my brain just suddenly because I had several thoughts that all collided at the same time and then with no outlet. So hey, that's not how we're gonna end the show.
Hey, pushes the button to end.
That's not
on brand.
That's not how that's not what we're gonna do. What kind of place do you think this is? Thank you everybody for coming and hanging out. I would like to remind everybody that if you find yourself enjoying any of what we do, you should probably go fill out the Patreon survey. Anyway, because it's important. And also, while I am here talking about this, I might add, fill out the Patreon survey. So, we got
Lucas. If I might add just one more
sure,
go
ahead.
Thing to
Absolutely.
that before we get on with the rest of the announcements, it's
fill out the Patreon survey.
Yeah. And I was going to do another one, and I've given up. So just
rule of 3. We've got 3 in.
Yeah, we've got 3 in. So also, Today is a completely normal Friday, as Nico points out in the chat, and it is in no way John's birthday. But if it was,
No.
as a birthday present, you should probably fill out the Patreon survey. So,
Brought it
all
back.
of you should go on Twitter and tweet at John happy birthday if it were in fact John's birthday.
If yes, hypothetically here.
Yeah, we're just speaking
Theoretically, it would cause me to. So one of my dear friends, something that I am known to do for people's birthdays is send little singing bartograms to people, and one of my dear friends did that for me today, and I have not recovered. I still have not recovered.
Amazing. Yeah. As I said, the full list of changes that we're bringing to Patreon will be posted on Patreon probably Sunday, but probably Sunday. Other things to note, of course, Infinite Horizon, this latest episode went up on YouTube today. You can check it out there. This is season 3, episode 10, Settling the Score.
So good.
Freeman fucking killed it in that episode. Fucking knocked it out of the park. Absolutely incredible. Like, fully improvising monologues about idealism, and it's fucking incredible.
I don't know where I was at, but I was in a good place for role playing.
I was just sitting over here, like, watching the episode, like, damn, dude, go off.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing. The latest and first episode of Into Deep Season 2 will be up on YouTube tomorrow. You can catch it there. The Infinite Horizon podcast will be present at in theory it will be there on Sunday. We just came back from a break and we don't remember how to do any of this shit. So it will probably be there on Sunday, but it also might be Monday. So yeah.
We're doing great. We're doing good.
I definitely did not definitely Infinite Horizon went up later today because of a planned reason and not for any other reason at all. That's definitely not for any other reason.
Is for faith.
That's it. That's all I got. That's all I Colin, most of these people know where to find you already, but just in case there's anybody who doesn't, why don't you tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, I don't know which side it's like this. I think it's this side.
Yeah.
It's at Colin_C_Kelly on Twitter. I haven't been doing too much apart from this recently and in Too Deep, but for my capstone project, I am making a TTRPG about Wild West wizards, and it's based in the Lumen system.
I did not know that. That's fucking incredible.
Yeah. I'm on a schedule, so it forces me to actually complete it.
Yes. So. Wild West wizards. I love it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, it's based in the Lumen system. Yeah, I haven't started writing it yet, so that's all I got.
Hell yeah!
I got a whole document.
I know how that goes.
Listen,
I've been an English major. I understand. I understand how not starting it goes.
Mm-hmm. I have so many games about goblins in my head that I have yet to write.
You have so many goblins in your head.
That's true.
One for each year you have been alive. So you have one more goblin today.
Yes, that was what we were celebrating today. Yes. Was the addition of a new
the
goblin
birth of an additional goblin.
The birth of an additional goblin.
You must construct additional We're gonna go.
I just watched Gremlins recently, and I can't stop but think about Gremlins right now. At least the first film.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us. Is still Luna streaming right now?
Let us see.
She usually is.
She's usually on around this time.
Drax said that he was guesting, didn't he? I'm pretty sure.
Does not look like.
Oh, damn. All right. Well,
let's see her online.
Oh, well. Okay. Well, that's too bad. Yeah, that's... Who is streaming right now that we could raid? I would like to raid somebody.
Gam is streaming right now. Persephoros is streaming right now. Pokemon Legends Arceus.
You know, we haven't rated Jam in a while.
I'll say hi to Jam.
Yeah.
Also, I like what the captions quoted that as when I went to look over Stellar, and it says, "Doesn't look like they're straight," for what it said, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, the captions are wrong.
I also appreciate it says your captions, Lucas, say we haven't rated Jam in a while. Like we all need to go over to Jam's stream and give it a 5-star out of 5-star rating because
Yes,
Jam is
the 5 out of
good
5
game.
because Jam is 5 out of 5. We're gonna do that. So yeah, everybody stick around to give Jam some love, and we will be back on Tuesday with Into Deep, season 2, episode 2. So we'll be back at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. I know when things happen here. And you will be able to see Colin once again. In fact, you will be seeing Colin sooner than you will see the rest of us. Yeah, so tune in for Into Deep. We will see you hopefully for that. But if not, we'll see you the next time you decide to come roll with us. This is me signing off, reminding all of you to celebrate the goblins born in your life. Construct additional goblins whenever possible, and fill out the Patreon survey. All right.
Yes, there it is. I was waiting.
Good night and good zone, everybody.
Good night, everybody.